The Minnesota Vikings season is over after they lost to the Detroit Lions 30-20. And as I begin this podcast, I might just say that this podcast might be my greatest podcast ever. Because I just took my phone off the charging machine, and if you're watching this on YouTube, look at the percent that it has in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Get it back here. 69%. This might be my greatest podcast ever. All of the mountains are moving at the same time. The planets are taking shape. What we are seeing is going to be miraculous from the Minnesota Tim podcast. That's my Bill Walton impression. And that's Bill Walton being excited about a 69% on an iPhone after picking it up off the charging station. But I have two words to describe this Vikings loss to the Detroit Lions. And that is the perfect loss. Now, I know that's three words, but if the President of the United States can say, I've got two words for you, made in America, if he can get away with that, why can't I get away with it? This guy is the President of the United States. It's one of the funniest videos out there. So if you've not seen this video, you should YouTube it, find it on social media somewhere. Joe Biden says, I have two words for you. Made in America. So, I have two words for you after this Vikings loss to the Lions. The perfect loss. And why is that? It's for several reasons. Justin Jefferson accumulated over 1,000 yards this season. Jordan Addison had 10 wide receiver touchdowns this season. Nick Mullins does what Nick Mullins does. He loses, but he threw for almost 400 yards. Nick Mullins has to be one of the most entertaining quarterbacks in the NFL, strictly for his unpredictability. He had 2 touchdowns. He had a clean card the entire game until the final 3 minutes where he threw 2 picks. And by that time, the Minnesota Vikings were basically out of the game anyways. But man, even when his card was clean, some of the throws he was making, the bombs to JJ and Addison, the 3rd and 30 completion, which was actually a 2nd and 30 completion to Johnny Munt. This guy is a gunslinger. And everyone compares him to Brett Favre because they went to the same college. They went to like Southern Mississippi or something. But man, Nick Mullins is an entertaining quarterback. And that's why this was the perfect loss. It was an entertaining game. Long completions to JJ and Addison and Munt. The Vikings moved the ball down the field. The Lions moved the ball down the field. They had lots of big plays to Amon St. Brown or whatever his name is. So the fact that both offenses were making big plays, the Vikings lose, secured the 11th overall pick, which is great for the Vikings because who knows where they would have been if they won. But I can tell you this, if the Vikings defeated the Detroit Lions, they still would not be in the playoffs. So, you look at the Vikings record, they're 7-10. They have better draft capital, whether they select where they're at or they trade up to a top 5 pick and draft a quarterback that they love. Teams are interested in a number 11 overall pick. They are more interested in trading back to the number 11 overall pick than they would be trading back to the number 14 overall pick, or whatever it would be if the Vikings won. So the fact that the Vikings lost in an entertaining way was awesome. And a couple of examination points throughout this game, in the first half particularly. when the Vikings kicked field goals, the reason why they kicked field goals was because of bad execution, not bad play calling. Mullins threw a deep pass to Addison. Historically, he comes up short on those throws. So Addison slows all the way down, and then he needs to try to make a diving catch last second. That's a bad execution play by the quarterback and the wide receiver, probably more on Addison. He stopped running. That would have been a touchdown pass if he didn't slow all the way down. And then another play, might have been the same possession, but it was an RPO situation. It was Mullins and either Chandler or Madison. I don't remember. I don't really care. Mullins handed the ball off to the running back, whoever it was. An RPO is a run-pass option. He had Munt wide open in the flat. And this eventually led to the Justin Jefferson reverse, and he got eaten up by Aiden Hutchinson. And then there was a delay of game call on the Minnesota Vikings. So that possession just became a disaster, and the Vikings kicked a field goal. So you look at this Vikings loss, this 30-20 loss, and I'm not surprised it was double digits. I'm more surprised that the Vikings didn't get defeated by more points. But there were 2 field goals. The Vikings kicked 2 field goals. They had 6 points to start the game. And you turn those 6 points to touchdowns, and this game might be completely different. And this is the difference between winning and losing. Everyone might, take a look at a bad play call by Kevin O'Connell, but you need to look at the execution of the players, because some of these plays would work if the execution was done correctly, which is why I have not been harsh or hard on Kevin O'Connell this season, because I think he's a brilliant offensive mind. And yeah, the Minnesota Vikings had lots of delay of game penalties, but that just might be an issue on Nick Mullins poorly communicating with his teammates and getting their butts in the huddle. So Vikings lose 30-20 in an entertaining fashion, and now they have the 11th overall pick in the NFL draft. And there are lots of conversations to be had. Will Danielle Hunter be back? Will Harrison Smith be back? Will JJ get an extension? Will Kirk Cousins re-sign for the Minnesota Vikings? Who are the Vikings going to target with the 11th overall pick? Are they going to trade up and draft a guy that they like? Maybe that North Carolina guy or Caleb Williams. So, lots of conversations, lots of fun speculation. By the way, at the beginning of the year, one of my takes was that, and I don't believe in bold takes, I just believe in takes. People that come out with these 10 bold takes to start the Viking season, they say bold to defend themselves a little bit. Grow a pair and say they're your 10 takes. Remove that bold from your situation. One of my 10 takes was that the Vikings would have a worse record than the Green Bay Packers. I said that before the season. In Jordan Love's first year as the starter for the Packers. That was one of my takes. And here we are. Somehow the Packers are in the playoffs, and the Vikings are 7-10. And I get it. The Vikings may have had a better record than the Packers if Kirk Cousins didn't get hurt, but he did. What am I supposed to do? Apologize for it? The Vikings had a worse record than the Packers. That was my take. I didn't say how it was going to get done. I didn't say Kirk was going to get hurt. I didn't say, Jordan Love was going to be a bombing machine. All I said was the Packers would have a better record than the Vikings. And now the Packers are in the playoffs, and the Vikings are 7-10 with the 11th overall pick. Let's see. Is my phone still at 69%? Sure is. 69%. Greatest podcast of all time. Everyone, thank you for listening to this episode. Appreciate you making this podcast and this episode a part of your day. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please rate, review, and follow the podcast wherever you're listening to this podcast.